Make sure that is enabled. And now when I play it midway through a MIDI note, it plays, which is fantastic because before doing this, and I was trialing different patches and sounds, I'd always have to wait for the beginning of a new MIDI note or sequence of notes for the sound to be triggered. And now I don't have to wait for that. So that's tip number one.
You're listening to the Inside the Mix podcast with your host, Mark Matthews.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the Inside the Mix podcast. If you are a new listener, a big welcome. Make sure you hit follow wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe and that notification bell so you get notified of new episodes. And as always, a huge welcome back to the returning listeners and viewers if you're watching this on YouTube. So approximately a year ago, I dropped the episode 82, 5 Essential Logic Pro Workflow Tips. And it turns out it's the most popular episode ever of the podcast, which is amazing. So I thought a year down the line, approximately a year, maybe longer than that, I think it might be longer than a year to be fair, I would record an update. So this is going to be an update episode as I've got, and I use different sort of workflow tips more than others now. So this is going to be an update for that episode 82, 5 Essential Logic Pro Workflow Tips. So go check out that episode after this one and see the difference between the two. So this one, I'm waffling now, as I usually do. This is going to be 5 Essential Logic Pro Workflow Tips 2024, let's say. So let's dive in. So this is tip 1, and it's called MIDI Chase. Basically, this solves the issue whereby the playhead is midway through a MIDI note and it doesn't play. So I'll do this now. So I've got this region here, this MIDI region, and I'm going to play it, and it's halfway through the note basically, and it won't play any audio until it gets to the beginning of the next MIDI note. So I'm going to play it. Okay, so to solve that, we do this. We go to File, we go to Project Settings, we go to MIDI, we go to Chase, and then we go to Notes. So it's MIDI, Chase, and then Notes. Make sure that is enabled. And now when I play it midway through a MIDI note, it plays, which is fantastic because before doing this, and I was trialing different patches and sounds, I'd always have to wait for the beginning of a new MIDI note or sequence of notes for the sound to be triggered. And now I don't have to wait for that. So that's tip number 1, to enable MIDI Chase. Tip number 2 is called MIDI Note Flam. And basically, we can use this to humanize a chord or chord progression or a MIDI chord or chord progression. So these 3 notes here make a chord, and they are quantized to the grid. And if I play it, all 3 notes of this chord are going to play at the same time. Okay, but what if I want to slightly stagger them? I can do this. I'm going to select all the notes, like so. And then I'm going to come to Region, and it says Main Arp in the inspector on the left. You need to make sure that you've got it quantized. And then down, if we scroll down, you've got more. It might be collapsed, so I'll expand it. And you've got Q Flam. So I'm going to click on that. And then basically you can drag it by ticks. And it will start, for those of you watching this, you'll start to see the notes moving. And they are staggering like steps. So if you go minus, then from the top down, it will shuffle the notes to the right. If you go the other way, if I go plus, from the bottom up, it will shuffle the notes to the right. So if I play it now, probably let's emphasize it, let's over-egg it. There we go. You can hear it makes it more human, and you can go further and then create an arpeggio sort of effect with this. So this is going from the lower note and then moving the higher notes to the right with the plus value. And if I go with a minus value, do the opposite. So the higher notes, and then it's moving the lower notes to the right, kind of like descending, if you will. So if I play it now, in fact, let's drag it a bit further. There we go. Quite a cool effect. Okay, so that's MIDI Note Flam. Tip number 3 is track auto color. So this is one that I started to use recently because I found it more and more of a ball ache to drag in stems and then change the color manually. And I was like, surely I could just drag them all in and have Logic do it for me and auto color. And you can. So what do I mean by this? So I've got these stems here, these midnight stems, deep blue, and I'm going to drag them into this session. I'm going to create new tracks. And it does it. And you've got these muted blue. They're all the same color. Pretty uninspiring, right? But we can change this so that Logic automatically colors them in this nice cascade of color. So I'm going to Command Z, I was going to say Control them. And I'm going to change the settings. So we go to Logic Pro, we go to Settings, and we go to View. And then we go to Tracks and Appearance. So track color, I'm going to set as Auto Assign 24. You can do 96 colors, but then the discrete colors, it can be quite difficult to differentiate. So I'm going to go with 24 to make it obvious. Region color as track color. So that means when I move an audio region from track to track, it will assume that track's color, saving me having to do it. And you can do the same with markers as well. So I'm going to individually, or rather auto assign markers too. So close that down. Now I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to drag these stems across. Create, or rather use existing. No, I don't need to use existing tracks because there are none. Well, there's one. Create new tracks. And now I've got this lovely cascade of color for those of you listening from top to bottom. And I'm going to delete one in the middle randomly, and I'm going to drag one up from the bottom, and I'll describe how it has taken on the color of that track. So I really like this one. I really like this one because I'm all about efficiency and organization. So that is tip rather. I was going to say track. That is tip number 3, and that is auto color tracks. Tip number 4 is auto create a sampler instrument. And I use this in almost every session. It's so quick to create a sampler instrument in Logic Pro. So in the Finder window, I've got these tom samples. I've got 6 of them, and I want to create a tom sampler instrument. So I select these, drag them into Logic, and I've dragged them to the tracks section, the track header section in Logic. And you have to wait a second, and then it will come up with this menu. So I can select a sampler chromatic map, sampler optimized map, or or a drum machine designer. And I like to use sampler chromatic map. The optimized map will change the pitch, and I don't want that. So I'm going to select chromatic map and drop. Now it opens the instrument, sampler instrument rather, and I can trigger these samples. So a really quick way to create a sampler instrument in Logic Pro. My 5th and final tip is the third tool tip. And I use this more than anything. And it was a game changer. I hate to use the word game changer because it's thrown about a lot, but it really was for my workflow. So by default in Logic, you'll have 2 tools available to you at any time. And the left click is usually your pointer tool. And then your option click is whatever you select as, is the marquee tool. I say the left click is usually the pointer tool, is whatever you select it as. So for me, the left click is the pointer tool, and the option click is the marquee tool. Now I've got a third tool here, so I've added one. I've enabled a third tool, which is the right click tool, and this is gain. So I use this for when I'm controlling the gain of an audio region. So how did I get that third one? Or if you want to disable it, you go up to Logic Pro and you go to Settings and you go to General. Here you click on Editing, and then you've got right mouse button, and then you can select. And I've got it selected. Rather, I've got the, from the drop-down menu here, is assignable to a tool. So if I were to I'm going to do Open Tools menu, Opens Tool menu. If I change that, you'll see at the top, if you're watching this, I've now only got Tool 2, rather, tools available to me. So I'm going to change this to is assignable to a tool. Easy as that. So I'll do it once more. Logic Pro, Settings, General, Editing, right mouse button is assignable to a tool. And I really do. Having 3 tools available to me, because particularly with podcast editing, it is extremely useful. So that is the 5th and final tip. That is to assign a tool to the right mouse click, or the third tool tip. So there we go, folks. Those are my 5 Logic Pro workflow tips for 2024. That is the update. So number 1, we've got MIDI note chase, so we can trigger the sound of a MIDI instrument midway through a note. We've got MIDI note flam, so we can humanize a chord or chord progression. We've got auto track color, so we can drag stems and audio into a project, and it will automatically assume a color. We can quickly create a sampler instrument by dragging audio into, or rather onto, the tracks region in Logic Pro, and we can select from 3 different options. And then we can also enable the third tool tip. If you've enjoyed this episode, folks, I want to hear from you. I want to hear your reviews and recommendations, and it will be part of the podcast. I will play them back at the beginning of a podcast episode. All you need to do is click the link in the episode description. It's a SpeakPipe link. You don't need an account. You don't need an app for it either. All you're doing is sending me an audio message like you would on Instagram or any other platform. Why would you recommend the episode? What did you enjoy about the episode? Can be this one, can be any episode. And also give yourself a shout out as well. Who you are and where the audience can find you online, your social media or a website. Or maybe you've got something new. You're releasing some music and it's coming out soon and you want to drop that date in a particular episode, because you will forever be part of the podcast then. And also, every month, I'm going to be doing a prize draw. So everybody who submits an audio review in the preceding month, I will enter your name in a hat, draw one lucky winner out, and you will win a Starbucks voucher. And if you don't like coffee, you can just give it to someone else and pretend that you bought it for them. So, folks, I cannot wait to hear your reviews of the Inside the Mix podcast. Click on that link, and I cannot wait to hear from you.